So welcome to our In Conversation event and the fourth event in our series of for this book series launch, and we're really celebrating the book of Wellbeing and Self-Care in Higher Education and Embracing Positive Solutions. I'm so delighted that we have quite a few of our authors here across multiple of the books. This morning here in Melbourne time, this evening in America, which many of our colleagues are here today for. And I'm just so glad that we've got a great combination of incredible authors in Malgorzata, Linda, Joanna, Suskya, Catherine, and Jane. We're just so delighted to be able to come together and celebrate our work and each other's work as well. But before we continue, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of our land and celebrate where we are joining from today. And I wish to also pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So this session, In Conversation session, is coming from the valuing of different perspectives, different lived experiences, and acknowledging that all of us have different journeys and pathways. And we celebrate this because it offers perspective that we can learn with and from each other. We come from a space of deep listening, no judgment, and mutual respect. And we also come from the space of right to pass. We're talking about self-care and well-being today. If anything triggers you, we have total respect in terms of you needing to leave the call or to take some time for yourself. And we hope that you have supportive people around you to help you process that. But if you do need to reach out, please do reach out to myself or anybody else here on the panel today. We also come from a space of courage and curiosity. We are open to explore. We all explore with a curiosity into how we can help ourselves with our well-being and our self-care, but how we help each other as well. And one of the most beautiful strengths that we all bring is a courage and a curiosity to do that and to be here as well with our writing. And we encourage that with you as well. As you explore your own positioning and how you care for yourself as well. So we're here to celebrate the book series on wellbeing and self-care in higher education. And I'm so delighted to be the series editor and to be able to bring together so many amazing authors across the world to really talk about how self-care is worthy of our attention and that we need to shift those conversations that so many of us have behind closed doors, or we're afraid to, or it's hidden, or it's dismissed. What we want to do is to really place these discussions at the forefront to disrupt current tensions where well-being is neglected, and to really say it is totally worthy of our attention to hear voices, to hear narratives, to see and experience and embody visual narratives, to explore in multimodal ways what self-care and well-being can look like when we're thinking about it from a flourishing perspective, when we're thinking about it from a thriving perspective, when we're thinking about it from interrupting notions of it that it's impossible and we can't do and that it's not valued. So the book series is very much about celebrating voice, narrative, visual narratives are a key feature throughout the book series as well in each chapter that brings out a beautiful sharing of discussions. We are raw and we are honest, and we do talk about the problems. There are problems in the sector, but what we do is we shift that forward and we begin to share how we think about it and how we try to solve it, to find some solutions in a part of respect to ourselves and what we're processing, but also to help others as well. It's important to hear other people's voices. A big underpinning of the book series is that self-care is not selfish, it is worthy of our attention and not something that we hide, be shamed for, or ignored. And hopefully you will feel that as we go through our session this morning together. We have so many beautiful, gorgeous books in the series. The blue and the yellow book have come out into the world, which is just gorgeous. And many who are here today have are authors in these books. With the beautiful pink and green book, they are in press at the moment, due to come out in August, which is just delightful. And again, there's quite a few of the authors here today who are featured in those books. We have beautiful popping colours with our covers. They bounce off our bookshelves, off our desks. They're going to be noticed when we're reading them, and that's a conscious decision in terms of being able to honor this conversation when we're not hiding what we're talking about, and we're really thinking about this is an important topic, and we need to discuss and connect with it. The 4 covers that are currently on the screen now are with different combination of authors and editors across the world that are due out in 2023 or close to that, which is just so exciting. The flow and effect of other international authors and editors coming through, and some beautiful topics coming through in terms of writing well, promoting staff well-being in higher education, women, and the place of compassion and COVID as well, which is just gorgeous. And the colours are just beautiful as they come through. There's a few other books as well that are in various different stages of being out for review, being proposed as well. So there's a lot of momentum going on with people all across the world in terms of connecting with this series on multiple levels. One of the most important things about this book series is not only about the series itself and our writing going out, but it's really about the whole process involved. And it's about acknowledging diverse voices, embracing different career trajectories, and the big place of mentoring in and across is important, right from proposals through the writing, the review stage, peer review, through our proofs, to celebrating when we come and read our words again after having not read them for a few months, and celebrating, wow, did I write that? To the moments where we get to read each other's work as well and provide feedback that supports moving through with flow and ideas. And it really has been about forming a beautiful community. And these book launch series are also a part of that community as well, is sharing out and embracing a beautifulness in terms of learning with and from one another. If we have a look at the first 5 books, the breakdown to see how many authors are involved, international voice, but particularly the doctoral and early career researcher voice that's coming through is at such a high percentage, which is just gorgeous to be able to provide experiences to share our work, to share our writing, to develop our writing skills with each other as solo authors or co-authors is quite significant. And to learn that genre of writing book chapters as well in a supportive environment where there's a ripple effect as well, and we've been able to replicate that experience with other projects as we all do that. And it's been an incredible, important aspect in terms of the book series. It is an absolute delight to be able to bring all our authors together today across a number of series, a number of books within the series, and particularly talk about the place of contemplative practices and what they are and how it looks like and the diversity that comes with that. But before we do that, I wanted to pass over to the gorgeous Philia, who I work very closely with from Rutledge, just to say a couple of words. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks, Narelle, and thanks everyone for having me and joining us on this chilly Melbourne morning, if you're here in Melbourne or in Australia, and good evening to everyone joining from the Northern Hemisphere. As Narelle mentioned, I'm the editor that I work with Narelle on the series based at Routledge. It's been a really exciting series to work on. Narelle and I started talking about this. She brought the idea up over a cup of tea at the end of 2018. So it's been a long time coming, but also has been so prolific and so exciting to see the momentum behind the series, after the first 2 books published last year. It's a really unique series, you know, sharing stories, practices for protecting and cultivating self-care and well-being, but also really still grounded in practice, in research, in literature. So it's this really beautiful kind of combination of the two, and demonstrating that in that the very unique workplace that you're all in academia, or whatever stage of your career, that these things can be cultivated and protected and celebrated. So it's wonderful to be here. Enjoy the wonderful conversation that's going to flow, I'm sure, and enjoy. Thank you.
Thanks, Bilia, for those lovely words. And Catherine, hello. I'm so delighted.
Hello there.
Great that you're here. And so in this session is on contemplative practices, institutional change, and forming a community of scholars. And you and your beautiful colleague Jane, who I'm also going to spotlight as well, because we're going to bounce off one another in this little part of our session, have co-written together. But first of all, Catherine, I want to ask you, contemplative practices come in many, many different forms. We've got formal practices such as mindfulness, meditation, but we also have practices such as Lectio Divina, which you are a guru in, writing, poetry, art making, movement. It really can be in a whole heap of different formats. So for you, what is a contemplative practice, and what does it bring to you as a person and academic?
Well, thank you, Narelle, for this wonderful book series, and Routledge for this wonderful book series, and the opportunity to share my experience with contemplative practices in collaboration with Jane. I will need to leave at 8:30 because of a prior commitment, so I apologize in advance for that. Contemplative practice to me means concentration. For example, the deep reading of the Lectio Divina process, in which a text is read out loud 4 times. Each time is followed by a pause for contemplating the text, words that pop out at me, significance of the words, their resonance for me emotionally, physically, and intellectually. That all is contemplative. Writing in my dream, gratitude, or insight journals, as well as writing poetry, engages me in a concentration as well. It's the flow that Michele Csikszentmihalyi would call flow. When I do these writings, time does not exist. Only my entire self, the page, and my pen exist as one unit. And for more about concentration, the way I got to this idea of concentration is by reading the poet Jane Hirshfield's chapter entitled Poetry and the Mind of Concentration in her book, 9 Gates, Entering the Mind of Poetry. I highly recommend that. And for more on Lectio Divina, Jane and I have been co-editors of a book about that. And have written articles with others about the multiple contemplative practices that we all use. So besides the Lectio Divina, the writing in journals, contemplative practices include meditative walking and sitting meditation, the more traditional. These all bring to me as a person and an academic, I think, calm. I feel calm after I have done these practices. And I have a renewed vision and energy that enables me to perform my academic and daily tasks with mindfulness and returning to kind of a centering and a calm.
Gorgeous. And I feel that centering and calm as you talk about it as well, which is just a beautiful embodiment. Jane, what about you? What does contemplative practice bring to you?
It brings a lot.
Yes.
For me, it's very generative and restorative. And I've meditated for well over 30 years. I've been an artist for 30 years. I revel in silence and stillness, and that's the opposite of academia. I've taught high school, I've taught higher ed, and the constant movement is something that whether I've taught high school students or whether I've taught my future teachers, I work in teacher education, once they become familiar with the balance that comes with being stillness and silence and centering and being in presence. I mean, presence with yourself and presence with others. It's a very powerful tool. I always tell my students presence is your best classroom management. I'll give you tips and techniques, but if you're present, if you're still, if you're calm, you're not raising your voice, you are more able to reach and teach your students. So for me, I've studied the mystics from many of the world's religions over the years, and I found them the greatest source of, Julian of Norwich, a lot of Teresa de Avila, looking at what the mystics have done and how they lived their life to be in presence and to be in love, in love with life. And we need that. We've all lived in such fear these last few years. So, and I've also been an artist. So I come out of expressive arts, which is about process over products. I look forward to one of your future books that I saw on your list. So bringing in that mindfulness and that meditation, being present, opens me up to an intuition when it comes to my artwork, and I can drop into any of my regular processes, one which is visual journaling. And just dropping into that place, whether it's through Lectio Divina or through just silence and letting words come up, or picking words or poetry out that I have, and using that as a place of creative reflection. So, one of my favorite people, which many of us know, is Parker Palmer, and he says, we teach who we are. So the more we know who we are, and we can get there and access that through contemplative practices, many of which Catherine mentioned. And our book chapter is that balance of working in collaboration, working in community, being generative and restorative. So,
gorgeous, gorgeous. Now, I want to ask both of you a little bit about, forming a community of scholars. But I want to first of all share a quote with everybody that's quite profound, was profound for me, and I think will be for others as well. And you both write, immerse ourselves in a contemplative approach to engage in creative artistic expression as a means of self-care, self-knowledge, and self-expression. And you both have sort of hinted at aspects of that, but what this really speaks to me is about forming a community of scholars, and that is what both you have done. But I wonder if you could share just a little bit of a snapshot to those that have joined us in real life today, and those that will be watching the recording, about what that means, and particularly from the perspective of your co-authored chapter.
Catherine, you want to start?
All righty. Yes. The collaboration was just natural. We met when we were presenting at a conference for the Association for Contemplative Mind and Higher Education. I believe it was 2018. And something about our approaches to art and to poetry and to contemplative practices synced, so that we work together with other people on other projects. And then when Narelle sent out the call for chapters, we thought, yes, we need to collaborate on this. And the collaboration became generative because I wrote a poem in response to an image by Jane, and then Jane created a piece of artwork in response to one of my poems. And this kind of mutuality, we had to be receptive to our own and each other's creativity and view. That receptivity and openness enabled us to send each other this artwork and trust each other with honest and deep and artistic responses to each other's work. Academically, I think the creative work and the responses fused with the intellectual framework about mindfulness and contemplative practices, but the creativity of it was the nurturing part and that receptivity. It became such a joy, and I cannot remember who wrote what, besides the sections that were specifically about our responses to the different art forms. But even with those, after the first draft, we were revising and communicating with each other about the pieces, so that there was a fusion. It was truly an ultimate flow of collaboration and community, of a scholarly community, but also a creative artistic community. So there was truly self-care, self-knowledge, and self-expression that was a wonderful experience. It was, to say it was so much fun and so enjoyable sounds as though it's not going to have any rigor or connections to the academic, but I would counter that actually enhanced the rigor and the connections that we developed in the process.
Yeah, I agree. I can't really add much to that, but I love the notion of receptivity, because by being receptive, that is contemplative, you're in stillness and you just hold space for whatever arises. And working with Catherine, we kind of jokingly said, did we really write a book chapter? Because it didn't feel like it. It was like playtime, and that playtime is generative. And the idea of letting words inspire an image or an image inspire words, really, for us, we really had a lot of fun writing it, and we're going to keep it up, because we all know, whether it's poetry or writing, whatever creative process, sometimes we just need someone to shore us up. So doing it in community is like, I need to pick me up, and then Catherine would send a poem, and I'm like, that's really great. Wait, let me get my art supplies out. They're always around me. So that notion of working in community is so important, because in education we work so isolated all the time. So it was beautiful process.
Yeah, and I love hearing both of you talk about the process, because it's really evident in the chapter, and it's a gorgeous chapter, and I've read it quite a few times. And it's a co-authored book where it feels like one person, and the embodiment of both practices and contemplative practices itself is so evident. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. And Catherine, thank you so much for being here, and a little wave goodbye, because I know that you've got to say goodbye soon. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, and thank you.
Yes, thank you, Narelle.
Pleasure. Thank you. Saskia, hello.
Hi.
I'm so glad that you're here as well. And you've written about appreciative circling as a novel hybrid practice that contributes to social, emotional, and mental well-being in the higher education setting. And you've written this gorgeous quote that you talk about: enhance individual and collective well-being, develop relationships, and build community while providing opportunities for scholarly growth of a doctoral student. And I think your strength-based approach that you present in the chapter, and the work that you've been doing, and how you share it really helps us work through, discovery and dream of what can be and what is possible when we position self-care and well-being at the heart of the doctoral experience, which is what I love so much. I'm going to put Joanna on the screen as well, because I'm going to get the two of you to sort of bounce off one another, because you have a beautiful relationship together, which I'm going to get the both of you to explain it to those that are here. So I wonder if you'd like to share a little bit about your chapter.
Sure. Our chapter is it's based on appreciative circling, which is a practice that that Joanna, my wonderful supervisor, and I have co-created. And initially, Jane, when you were speaking before, and there was that talk in your discussion earlier about that sense of isolation as academics. And I was a doctoral student starting out, and I really felt like there was a real lack of social connectedness. And together, Jo and I decided to do something about it. Rather than sort of wallowing, we decided to take some action. So we created these doctoral circles, and there's more and more of them every year, and they now span all of our university, and there's talk for it moving beyond that. So that's sort of where all this has come from.
It's just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. I love the vision and the work that the two of you do as PhD student supervisor. But we were talking about before we formally started this event that you both are colleagues, and you have very much become incredible colleagues, and the work spans beyond the PhD and is a true embodiment of a collaboration, which has just been so gorgeous to watch over a number of years, and also to be a little bit part of that as well. So I'm going to bring Joanna into the conversation and invite both of you to bounce off one another if you wish to. But Joanna, you've written with Suskya, and we've also, you and I have also written together. We have a chapter in the 5th book in the series, which is looking at self-compassion, compassion, and COVID and change. And we talk about the sense of belonging and disrupting the traditional notions of boundaries. And in some ways, this is the work that the two of you have been doing as well for PhD doctoral students, and in disrupting that feeling of isolation. But the chapter that the two of you have written together so speaks to institutional change, and especially on changing how we engage with the institution, the academy, and each other. So I wondered if you'd like to share some insights about that.
It's just been, thank you, Narelle, and it's wonderful to be part of this book series. And yes, Suskya and I have a very productive relationship, and I think it has. I think that Catherine and Jane talked about the generative nature, and certainly that's something that we've experienced. And it's not just us; there's others as well. Our colleague Grant and other people. It kind of ripples out, but I think it's interesting for me as being in the, having been in the academy for a little while, and just thinking about, those traditional structures and how one might disrupt them, and just being, and I think the more I think about it and the more I work with Suskya and other doctoral students, I don't think of them as students, they're my colleagues, and I learn so much from them, and it's always surprises me that those traditional boundaries of supervisor student hold firm still in many people's minds. And I think that's why the work that we're all doing collectively is so important, because it's kind of, you just think, well, why are we holding on to these structures? And sure, there are all of the institutional procedures and policies and all of those sorts of things, but it's like, for me, thinking how you navigate those, how you could nudge them, shape them if you're in a position of responsibility, say as an associate dean or whoever you are within that structure, and just thinking, well, how can we open it up? Because it's, for me, it doesn't make any sense to hold on to those structures, because I just think it's not the best way that people learn, and it's not a comfortable way for people to be. We want to, it's not good for, self-care, well-being, any of those things. So I think for me, I was thinking a bit about, how did I come to this place of thinking more, and I've just little phrases like generosity of spirit, having a generosity of spirit. And I can't remember who said that, but way back, and just thinking, okay, if you can nudge things by actually using that generosity of spirit, rather than standing on where you are in a hierarchy. I mean, the academy is really fraught with positional titles, processes, and it'd be good if we could all, our work, and I'm sure it will have some impact, but we might nudge the whole system to change, perhaps.
I love that. And I often write inspirational words or quotes on sticky notes, which I think many of us do. And I think my next new one, Joanna, is going to be nudge. I just love what that means and what that infers. And I think the work that both you and Suskya do, and really everybody here, you know, it just brings so much in terms of nudge. And as Jonathan's writing in the comments there, it's the word of the day, nudge. Maybe it's the word of the year. We'll sit with that. So thank you so much, both of you, for sharing and also sharing your collaboration as well.
Thanks, Narelle.
Thank you, Narelle.
Linda, hello.
Hi, Narelle. Hi, everybody on the call, and those who will be listening asynchronously. Thank you for being drawn to this work. Thank you for allowing it to move into your spaces.
Beautiful, thank you. And I'm going to bring Malgorzata onto the screen as well, because the two of you are also a beautiful, beautiful collaboration and have written a couple of chapters for the book series now, but you're in the first book, the yellow book, which we're celebrating today, which is just gorgeous. But Linda, I want to ask you first, what strikes me about your writing and your co-authorship, collegial collaboration with Malgorzata, is the act of intentional support for each other. And I've had the great opportunity of getting to know both of you for a number of years now, and something that really strikes me is that both in your words, how you write them, how you speak, is this collaboration comes through, and you are almost like a united voice. It's like two brains coming together, coming out in just the most gorgeous way. And I know sometimes you often sit with each other and write in the same location. And so I wanted to just ask you if you could share some insights into your approach, because I feel like this is you know, a mindful act, a contemplative practice in itself, in how that you work together.
Thank you for the question, Narelle. Again, chatting with Malgorzata, and my thoughts, or our thoughts, are always entwined. But we began our co-authoring sitting side by side, as you mentioned, in my kitchen, you know, right over there, which is illustrated in one of the chapters of our book, beautifully illustrated by my son. He just tapped into the intimacy of the moment. As we sit together, we've been quite prolific in our writing during COVID, which on occasion, you know, we didn't have the comfort of being in the kitchen. Malgorzata was often overseas, and I was here in New York, so she was time zones away. But the circumstances dictated at the time for us to be virtual. But the metaphor that comes to mind in our collaboration is almost that of two astronauts who are working in space on the mechanics of a vessel. And most often we're just sort of tinkering with different parts of the work, but we have an embodied sense of the other's presence in that tinkering, despite the fact that we don't actually see each other often across the universe. So this idea of temporal and spatial boundaries, they're not usually part of a limiting piece that we see in our process. So I'll just sort of push that out for now.
Yeah, nice. That's just gorgeous. Malgorzata, I wanted to ask you contemplative practices for you. What do they look like as an educator? How do you make sure that we connect with what is important in this busy, complex, confusing world we're currently navigating?
Well, thanks, Narelle. It's so beautiful to be part of this conversation. A lot of what has been said so far resonates so much with me. The importance of presence, not only in teacher education, but also outside, like in life in general, valuing process over product. Oh my God, that is so important. And we, Linda and I, try to really bring it into education and really, disrupt the structure where, like you working towards that grade, but not really paying attention to the journey. So yeah, definitely a lot of what we are hearing here are things that Linda and I are experiencing and really valuing. And it's such a beautiful thing that you were able to gather collaborators, that we are all people who have someone else that we work with and someone else that supports us. This nurturing and receptivity that was spoken about is also something that's really important in any type of collaboration. For me, one of the grounding activities that I engage in is gardening. And I often find myself thinking of educators as gardeners who tend to the needs of their fledgling teacher candidates. So in our work, we plant seeds, then we carefully nurture our students and bear witness to the sprouting and flowering. So we need to stay cognizant of how we group them, making certain each has space to grow. And we often bend over in providing a stick or scaffolding of compassion. And we are also sensitive to the needs for nourishment as we pause, for example, while we're teaching, so that our students can resource themselves. And how do we make sure that we connect with what is important? So what's important is each other. So constantly coming back to what's of value, compassionately connecting to people. And that is a daily practice, the way of being.
Oh, beautifully, beautifully said. Thank you. Just gorgeous. Okay, so multiple chapters in the book series by both of you. One in the yellow book, which we have to flat up. Beautiful yellow book, yay! And another one coming out in book on COVID compassion and change, which we're at the stage of the full manuscript about to go off to Routledge to begin the in-press stage, which is just gorgeous. So I wanted to ask you both if we could have some little snapshots, insights into both these gorgeous chapters, if possible.
Sure. So as you know, Narelle and guests, Linda and I have been co-teaching foundations courses in the secondary teacher education program now, like I would say over 5 years now. And then co-teaching and co-presence is really where we find strength and support. However, we find that this model is quite rare and does not fit neatly into the halls of School of Education, even though it has become quite prevalent in the public school system, which we prepare our teacher candidates to enter. Our two chapters that we co-authored are structured quite similarly. We begin by each sharing our individual threads, and then we follow by our mutual tapestry. So just to illustrate, with your permission, Linda will share a next excerpt from the Bushwhacking a Path Forward chapter.
Thanks, Malgorzata. Yeah, I'm enjoying this because, as you mentioned at the top, Narelle, we revisit our writing. We write, we reread it, and I go, oh, I wrote that. That's interesting. And
yeah.
So as I read, I'm sure I'll find new meaning in what is here. But thank you for indulging us. So we identify as educators, planting seeds of mindfulness in teacher education. Our enactments offer a mirror that can reflect the relational nature of teaching and learning, positioning us as instruments of emotional attunement in our classroom interactions. We have learned that the aspiration of seeing and hearing each other begins with us. In our course planning meetings, we strive to create openness as a prerequisite to a shared vision. This involves patience, acceptance of the limitations in individual perspective, forgoing ego and judgment. In essence, we value and are guided by the principles of growing from difference. Sometimes, however, we get stuck. Linda's perspective is blinkered from daily immersion in the high school setting, where scaffolding assignments and over-communication is essential. Does not always translate well into working with graduate students. On the other hand, with a background in adult ed, Malgorzata tends to insist that responsibility and ownership for learning be firmly situated within our students. The challenge posed by these divergent approaches is compounded by the fact that we process information differently. Linda is a big picture visionary, while Malgorzata favors attention to detail. Most of the time, a mindful pause or a teasing comment can relax the tension, seeing our individual perspectives as one among many possible truths. When we don't lead with our head, when we choose to lead with our heart, we each step back and empowered to move forward together.
Incredible. I think it's just a moment of pausing there. Just gorgeous words. Thank you so much. And I think the power of leading from our hearts rather than our heads, and what that means is so incredible. And I think also what that brings is a raised awareness that that's very much a strong through line that's come through what we've heard from each author and in conversation panelists today, which is gorgeous. And I think that brings us to a beautiful transition to bringing everybody of our panelists back into the spotlight to have a combined conversation in regards to thinking about where we go and what is possible. And I want to think and connect to the words of Audre Lorde, who writes, self-care is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political welfare. And I think also that what comes with this is optimism is one of our tools. And optimism is about maintaining a positive attitude and outlook on life. It's about seeing opportunity. And this really excites me because I think our presentations and discussions today, plus the book series, are really underpinned by this, but all of your individual and collective work is underpinned by it as well. And seeing opportunity, seeing what is exciting, even though we know that there's issues. Gravity is issues because they're so complex. So I wanted to ask each of you if you could share a top tip, because I love top tips. And I think they're great takeaways as well for others. A top tip on what each of you have learned about approaching relationships in higher education to support wellbeing. And I ask from this perspective and with optimism sitting there, because relationships are a critical part of our wellbeing and self-care in so many different ways, in terms of motivating us, supporting us, encouraging us, inspiring us, actually being a part of it. But I also ask from the perspective that all of you are co-authors and you co-write with each other in ways that is quite unique. And we kind of feel like today that co-authorship is a standard thing, but it's actually not a standard experience, nor a positive experience for so many people. But all of you have demonstrated what's possible when you almost become two brains as one in that process. But it's in a contemplative practice in itself. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to open up the discussion here to hear your insights. And I'd love in our last sort of 15 minutes to bounce off one another and hear your top tips about maintaining a positive attitude and outlook on life, and what that means in approaching relationships that support and enhance our wellbeing in higher education. Who wants to go first?
I could start with that.
Beautiful. Thanks, Joanna.
Suskya and I had a discussion yesterday about top tips and the sorts of things that we might talk about. But one, I think, is seeing the potential in people. So looking at people's strengths and finding a way to cultivate that through creating a community. So that would be my top tip. And I think underpinning that is devoting time so that one can do that. We're all very rushed, so having that time, having a purpose, and being humble and open to possibilities. And certainly that's the way that Suskya and I have been able to work. I've learnt so much from her, and it's just very inspiring.
Gorgeous. I love that top tip. Really nice.
I can jump in. I remember when I was, a green academic and walking down the tenure path terrified. So I love that these books are reaching out to, the early researchers. I think that my two top tips is just make those connections. I met Catherine through someone else who thought, you'd like her. And those type of connections it goes back to receptivity. Just, let people guide you and keep those communications open and those connections, whether it's at a conference or having a conversation with someone about, I really enjoy doing this. And that's how I met Catherine. They're like, you two kind of really are very similar. So I think being receptive and open is really helpful. And the other piece is, humility, but more like gratitude. I think I've been so grateful for the other academics who have come across my path who have shored me up and might just give me a tidbit. Someone else might really hold my hand as I move through a process. So that sort of deep gratitude is really huge. So I would say my top two is like make as many connections as you can and let people connect you, and then hold gratitude in your heart for the gifts that come to you that can really help you on this journey, because it doesn't need to be isolated and alone. We are a community. We're in two hemispheres, and look at us. We're doing awesome. So those are my two top tips.
Gorgeous. I love those top tips. Malgorzata.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was going to jump in because connection is something that really moves me. And whenever I think of connections, I think of the work of Richard Davidson of University of Madison, Wisconsin, and who founded Center for Healthy Minds. Their mission is to cultivate well-being and relieve suffering through a scientific understanding of the mind as a way of contributing to a kinder, wiser, more compassionate world. So in the research, they found that connection, the quality of connections really is incredibly important for human flourishing. So that's something that really nurtures us. And I also think about Thich Nhat Hanh, who talks about interbeing. We are so connected and cannot really, I cannot say cannot, but we don't really exist in isolation. We have to be there for each other. We have to support each other. And so I am so fortunate to have Linda. So whenever I struggle with, being mindful, she's there for me, and I can always get support from her. So yeah, thanks.
Beautiful. Just so gorgeous. Suskya.
Yesterday when Joe and I chatted, the top tip that I thought might be worth sharing, I feel like it's already been sort of explained, but maybe it's a slightly different take on it. So I'll share it anyway. And it was actively seek your tribe. So it's not just waiting for people that you might connect with to just fall into your social realm. It's genuinely and actively going and seeking people that really resonate with you and then cultivating that and treasuring that. Putting that time and energy into that cultivation. And for me, it looks like these doctoral circles where I get to hang out with all these amazing doctoral students around the world, and we do have these incredibly inspirational conversations and connections. The co-writing with Joe and the rest of our team is just, it's so awesome. And I'm so glad that I got to have that bit of my tribe so early on in my career. I just feel incredibly grateful for that. And then in terms of across universities as well, I'm a rep for the New Zealand Association for Research and Education, and being able to work with lots of other student and emerging researchers is just, for me, I just love that tribe as well. So for me, actually seeking those connections, but then really nurturing them and appreciating them is my top tip.
Gorgeous, gorgeous. Linda.
Thank you for just holding up this gratitude and appreciation, which is just kind of a lifeline. It's a breath, it's an in and out breath. I think, I don't know that I think, well, I do. For me, as a woman who likes to control situations, very controlling. This idea of forgoing judgment, this idea of just, not judging what's there, not thinking that I know, knowing that I don't know most of the time, and approaching each situation as a learning event rather than a power play. This is something that is part of my path of growth right now. But I just offer that if anybody else feels that they might be, passing across that idea of control and how does that lay, it's just turning from judgment to I'm wondering, I'm curious about, let me find out, what if, just opening my mind to those kind of that inner dialogue as opposed to the other one, just changing the habits of mind to turn less from judgment and just to gratitude and to curiosity. That's where I would lie right now.
Just gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And judgment to wonder. Yeah, I've got the love heart going, Suskya, as well. Just like, or in Malaysia, we do our little lovey hearts with our fingers this way. Just gorgeous and so powerful. Okay, my wall is now covered with so many different sticky notes after today's session. I'm going to have to redo it with judgment to wonder, the gracefulness that comes from appreciation for each other, learning with and from each other, nudging, and really thinking through even how we talk about each other. And Suskya, you used the words student and emerging researchers. And I just love that because that feels so collegial as well. So there's just so many. I love it when I get to bring people together, and it's one of my most beautiful gifts that I can facilitate through this book series, but events like this and today has just been such a gorgeous celebration of this because of the insights that you have all provided from your chapter, but really of who you are as individuals, as scholars, as colleagues, as collaborators as well is just amazing. And the cultivating our well-being connection with each other has been really critical, and I hope that that's really inspired so many who have joined us today in real life, virtually, or will be watching this recording as well. And also thinking through contemplative practices. We hear the term and sometimes it's a bit scary and you're like, what is that? That sounds a bit full on, but I'm hoping that we've been able to inspire and empower in a way that contemplative practices really are can be embodied in so many different ways, but what they bring is a beautiful ability to be present in flow, to be totally immersed with who we are and what we're doing, to interrupt, notions of tension and what they can be for us. So colleagues, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your wisdom, your passion, your love, your compassion as well, with all of us in today's In Conversation event, but the book series. I want to also say thank you so much to those who have joined us as well. I'm so glad that you've been here, and there's a few faces and names that I am noticing that have been to multiple other events as a part of this book series. So thank you so much for your support and your inquiry, your courage and curiosity, which we very much have outlined as a part of the book series, but this In Conversation event. I also want to give my heartfelt thanks to Jonathan, who has been amazing in the chat. Thank you so much, and has been a beautiful colleague. It has supported me behind the scenes in each of these 4 events. Also acknowledging Chin and Inga as a part of our Whisper Collective, Thesis Whisperer, Research Whisperer and Wellbeing Whisperer, who have been co-sponsors. I also want to acknowledge Vilya from Rutledge, who's been amazing support, from a wacky idea that I had to multiple drafts and visions to making the book series possible, and then bringing so many wonderful people together. So thank you for your amazing support and collegiality and ongoing wonderful conversations that we have as well. And in Australia right now, it's early morning, so we are going to go off and pour our second cup of coffee. And for those that have joined us from the States, it's your evening. I'm wishing you all the best as you transition to the end of your day. And for everybody, colleagues, thank you so much for being here, for your support. The book series is available online to hear all about it and see as it grows through Rutledge. And of course, we've shared links in some free gifts of downloadables, some insights as well. So hoping that you can access those and enjoy the reading of some of our authors across the series to date. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We're going to collectively say goodbye and sharing out the love as we value our well-being with each other and for each other. Goodbye and thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.